All right, we are now joined by superstar reporter Jori Epstein with USA Today. You can find her at Jori Epstein, a University of Texas alumna and someone who has moved through the ranks so quick on this Dallas beat by virtue of you do such a good job of really connecting with these players, Jori. Your relentless relationships with them are something that have always stood out to me, and you're one of those on the beat that has this dynamic relationship with Dak. I get the sense that Dak really trusts you. Have you talked to Dak about some of these comments that have come out in the wake of his admission of dealing with depression and the loss of his brother Jace?
I mean, specifically when it relates to Jace, more so in the group setting that we've all been into, but I think that his line has pretty much been the same, and we've just seen Dak everything one at a time. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's his contract, losing his mom, losing his brother. It doesn't matter what goes wrong. He just owns it. And that was why it was almost a little bit ironic that someone could say, like, oh, he's being vulnerable. That's a sign of weakness. Because if you know Dak, you know that anytime he has adversity, he transforms it into a strength, whether it's, oh, my mom died of cancer. Well, now I'm going to help fund cancer research. I'm trying to think of all the other examples. Oh, I'm biracial and my parents had this like tricky history. Well, why don't I go help improve trust in law enforcement now? And it's just like, no matter what it is, he processes it and then takes it to the next level to help other people with his adversity. And I think that's what he's doing here. And I mean, it was refreshing. We're recording this on Friday to see Mike McCarthy and Jerry Jones support that because, again, I haven't been in the industry that long, but 10, 20 years ago, you're not seeing this type of honesty and vulnerability owned in the same way. And one more thing I would add is when you're like, oh, what are his teammates going to think of him? Well, when someone says that, I think of Michael Gallup, who 18 months prior to Dak also lost a brother to suicide. And if you're Michael Gallup, do you know how much it means to you that now you know this is how someone can own their pain? And Michael owned his too. So I just thought that he handled it with grace, but that's no surprise.
You know what, though, just to add on that, Jori, I thought what was fascinating about it is some of us knew about this early on and chose not to report it. And I had reached out to him the particular day that news had broke, and I could tell he was not okay, and I had heard he wasn't okay. We don't typically hear him say he's not okay. I mean, when we think about what he went through his rookie year and the way that people have talked about the nuances of this contract and what he deserves or doesn't deserve, he has, I pointed out today on NFL Network, he has such an amazing ability to just compartmentalize everything.
Right.
And so to hear him actually say, I'm struggling with this, I thought it was big. And I think more importantly, people didn't really listen to everything that he said, as typically we don't in this age of Twitter and social media. He talked about how Jace was the primary caregiver of his mother, Peggy, and all of the medication he had to give her and watching her get sick, and how he internalized that and probably didn't talk about that enough. And what I got a sense was Dak realizing how destructive that can be. And so it just, the whole thing, I can't even imagine somebody taking that position. Bobby, I don't know your thoughts on this, but it almost feels, not that it's, look, I get the bag on Skip. It's been well documented. I couldn't believe how much just the nightly news anchors went in on Skip last night on the 10 o'clock news. I don't know if any of you guys watched that. Yep. And of course we are on Fox Sports Radio, but it just felt like such an interesting take that it makes you wonder, was there something in his own personal life that had Skip go to that place? It was an odd take to have that an opposing defense would weaponize this against a player, and that's why you have a problem with it.
Well, and to basically frame it as not just, he had a problem with the way it was dealt with or whatever, I'm talking about Skip Bayless's reaction to it, but to frame it as if it's a leadership issue is really weird to me, because I think anybody who, and this was repeated by a ton of people on Thursday, that there are so many criticisms that you can try to level against Dak Prescott. Some of them legitimate, some of them not, some of them up for debate. But realistically, the one area where you can never question is leadership ability, the way guys follow him, the way guys gravitate towards him, and the way he can kind of cultivate, everybody's different personalities together and press forward. And so it was odd on that front mainly to me. I mean, it was ignorant in general what he said, but to me it was like, this just seems like something that you're trying to frame in a certain way for whatever talking points you need or for whatever content you need, And it's verifiably false, the implications that he derived from it.
Yo, the logic to me is so ass backwards. That's like saying because Matthew Stafford and his wife, remember when Kelly was going through some of her issues, because they talked about that opposing defense, they're going to weaponize the fact that his wife is dealing with, what was it, a brain tumor? No one would ever say that.
Well, that's why I asked Dak yesterday. I'm like, you're so good at blocking out the outside noise, but I think we need to distinguish between that and the voices inside our head, because it's not that Dak's saying like, oh, someone said something to me and I'm going to fold now. It's, no, this is real. Mental illness is real. Dak has dealt with a lot of trauma in his life. And even though, there's nothing credible about the criticism that was there, but it's not that Dak is saying, oh, and I was sad, so now I'm not going to go help my team. It is actually kind of the opposite, that he loves just rising to the occasion and being there. And in quarantine, there were fewer opportunities to do that, which led to this. And then there's just the whole kind of like eerie part that this is happening a couple days before Jace shoots himself. And then Dak has his best night of sleep of 2020 and wakes up to his dad and his best friends in his room telling him like Jace is dead. And I had obviously nowhere near the amount of interaction with Jace that Dak did, but the few times I didn't meet him, it was such a sweet teddy bear. I remember I was in Houghton in Dak's hometown. He was doing his camp back there, and I had driven over to the other part of campus to go in because Dak was speaking, and I'm like having trouble backing out my car, and all of a sudden someone comes up to me and they're like, hey, do you want some help? And it's Jace directing me backing out my car. And it's just like those things that like, this is his brother's camp. We didn't know each other that well, but whether it's that or texting back about like the little ways they would compete about the stories, or I think at his gala last year, I left my notebook. It was actually funny. I'd like asked them for something, wrote it in a notebook, and then left it in the bathroom class. Absent-minded me, and like the Dak's brothers bring it back to me. They're like, oh, I think you forgot this. And it's just like that to me. It's those little moments when I'm like, this is who they are. They're all just so down to earth. And that's why when they show this vulnerability, it's like, no, we want to confront this because we're not going to let it stop us. And in order for it to not stop us, we need to get help. And that's what Dak did.
Well, and what I hated the most, it sort of broke my heart yesterday when he said, I got the help that I needed and I dealt with it. You don't just deal with that stuff, you don't deal with the fact, especially when, you made a promise to your dying mother that you guys were going to look out for each other. And I've got to think that there's, parts of Dak that hate that he wasn't able to convince him otherwise, or that he didn't have an idea that was going on in his head. And that messes with somebody. And we've all dealt with moments of depression and second guessing ourselves in isolation and with COVID. And so I can't even imagine what that's now like on a whole nother level. It's just, we could talk about this for hours, but I know, Jori, you also have a good relationship with Dak. I say this often, he's worthy of your applause. There are so many people I say you really should never meet your heroes. They will disappoint you. Dak has literally just impressed me time and time again, starting from the time he's never changed. And he literally never attacks people, goes after them. Sometimes I wish he would defend himself a little bit more. But even on this subject yesterday when he was asked about it, didn't go there. And so I just have such an immense respect for him. And I think it says a lot about the way he's touched other people, the way people came to his defense. Like there was such a visceral reaction yesterday, as there should have been.
Oh, when I saw Kevin Love tweeting like Dak saved lives today, it's like that got to me, because I remember seeing when these NBA players really started opening up about their mental health. And it was, one, so powerful, but two, we know that the NBA and NFL are a little bit different levels of progressive. And it just, not that no players in the NFL had said something, but it was interesting whether it would become a culture. And I think we saw the NFL take a step in that direction yesterday. And it's just like, it was simultaneously amazing to see Dak be a part of it, and yet in the moment, it just felt so normal because he does these things so often that like I have to step back and be like, wait, yesterday not everyone was saying this, or yesterday all of these sportscasters, athletes, this and that weren't talking to us about, even Todd Archer on our beat tweeted about it, how it might have been Dak's finest day on the beat because he's still dealing with losing a friend to suicide 3 years ago, and he's like, you don't get over that. And it was just like the type of conversations we had yesterday. It was a whole nother level, and it made me so grateful to cover a player like Dak because, yeah, we like the game of football, but I wasn't like, oh, man, 3 days till the game, and we didn't get a lot about what the receivers are going to do when they all get out there. No, this is what we do. We get to use our platform, and it starts with sports, not ends there. And it was amazing to have Dak participate in that movement.
That's the thing that I think is most interesting about Dak Prescott is that, we talk about what a leader he is and the way he handles himself and how he's remained true to himself. But there's a particular focus within the building for the Cowboys to make sure that guys who come here understand what it means to be a Dallas Cowboy, the optics of being a Dallas Cowboy, the weight of that star and things like that. And that's the thing that I think has always been most, and you've heard Stephen Jones and Jerry Jones and other people reference this consistently, which is he knows how to handle himself. The quarterback position on any team has that kind of pressure on it. But then you extrapolate, you double, triple, whatever it, making it the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys. And he has just been so uniquely equipped to handling those sort of things that are not always easy to handle. And it is one of the things that they always point to when they talk about keeping him long-term. And to that point, talking about keeping him long-term, shifting just a little bit here, you do have that good relationship with Dak. We've all heard the conversations about how the contract negotiations went and his future here. And Jerry saying this week, he's our guy. We want him here. That's for the future. What's your best guess as to why this didn't get done this offseason? Why are we still sitting here on the franchise tag? Is this strictly, you think about negotiations and differences in dollar figures and contract lengths, or is there somebody here on either side who's a little, wants to slow play this a little bit, isn't exactly ready for the long-term commitment to the other?
You bet. I think it's interesting because I'm certainly no billionaire like the Joneses, and so I think you got to respect their business acumen and that Jerry likes to go against the grain, and maybe that's what he's trying to do here. But then you hear Dak say, well, it's not that, 35, 36, whatever it is. It's not so much about the money as it is the respect factor of, I've done everything you've asked of me on and off the field. Okay, has he gotten to a Super Bowl? No. Have most quarterbacks in the league? No. But he wants to be paid fair market value to show that the Joneses respect what he done. And it was actually funny in that sit down with Graham Bensinger. The time I saw him get a little chippy was when they asked about Jerry backing Romo in the middle of his rookie year. And it almost kind of like the way he responded to it, I felt like was so apt for now, because it's like, Jerry, respect me. And again, I think that's where Dak's coming from. But I will say, no question to me do I think that Dak wants to play for the Cowboys. And I do believe, although they're not putting their money where their mouth is, that the Cowboys want Dak to be their quarterback and get what they have. But I did start to wonder a little bit after it didn't get done this year what was going on. And I know we all know the status. Since the franchise tag was implemented in 1993, no quarterback has played on that tag and then stayed with the team that drafted them. That's the year Dak was born. I mean, like in his lifetime, this hasn't happened. But then it was funny. I was Zooming with Dak and Zeke this week through one of their Tostitos commercials. And I asked Dak about the Deshaun contract, and he kind of smiled and was like, I'm not going to say I'm always right, but I'm confident in what I'm doing. And then I asked Zeke, what would it be like to play in this offense without Dak? And Zeke was like, no way. Like, it's not happening. I'm going to fight for my guy. I mean, it was the emotion. Like, it wasn't so much the words, but just the way he said it. And then we go 3 or 4 more questions later. And then Dak is talking about Zeke and how he helps him on the field and just brings it back to, like, I'm not even asking Dak that question. And Dak goes, and like Zeke said, like we're in it for the long haul together, et cetera. And then you pair that with he's moved his family to North Texas. I do think they're going to figure it out, but I didn't think it would take this long. How about you guys?
I mean, Jori, you and I have talked about my read on this thing. There's been some dispute about the 11th hour phone call, but Stephen Jones has confirmed that publicly, that there was this 11th hour push. I got the sense that Dak wanted to get a deal done, and I think you've got to trust the wisdom of your agent and the guy that's what he does. What Dak is so good about is staying in his lane, right? Like, I don't feel like he ever tries to be something he's not, and in this situation, it was relying on Todd France to do his job. I think they just played chicken a little bit too late in the game, and I think ultimately, the way it was described to me, they just couldn't get the deal done. I don't think there was a lack of a desire there, but to be fair, the Cowboys they've never done something before. The best way to show respect to your player is do something you've never done before. Give him the 4-year contract and the $40 million a year, like Deshaun Watson, who has a similar resume. So, look, I think egos got involved
Not
here.
Dak's, but yes.
That's my point. I think egos got involved here, and I think what was driving me nuts about the narrative that was out there was that it was Dak's ego, and Dak wanted the money. I mean, Dak was just talking I mean, Dak has told us he was in a hole. He was depressed during all of this. Like, he was a sports psychologist about stuff that had nothing to do with that contract. I don't believe he was sitting there marinating on the money. He was worried about other things, but he had allowed his agent to handle these negotiations. And I do believe that some egos on both sides, mind you, got involved. The Cowboys are used to you picking up the phone, as we saw with DeMarcus Lawrence and even Rocky Arsenault, Zeke's agent, at the 11th hour to get stuff done. Now, when I say 11th hour, it's 4 or 5 hours or a day before the deadline, not what was characterized to me as it was definitely 2 hours away from the deadline. I heard 1 hour. So I'll leave it at that. So I think that is the unfortunate part of it, because I do believe that I was even told Dak was advised not to sign the franchise tag because they wanted a bargaining chip, and Dak was the one that said, nope, I want to sign this franchise tag. He wants to be here. So I think that's what's unfortunate, but I think it's helped that they've waited a year, because now we're seeing what the Patrick Mahomes contract did and what the Deshaun Watson contract did. So, I mean, he stands to make $37.5 on the franchise tag. Why wouldn't the Cowboys pay him at least $40 million next year?
And here's the curious thing to me is that we consistently heard, going back to last summer, when he became available to be able to negotiate an extension, rules allowed him to do so. There was this talk of, okay, get it done before Wentz and Goff. And then those got done. And then it was, okay, we'll just get it done before Watson and Mahomes next offseason. And then Watson and Mahomes. Now we're looking at, okay, get it done next offseason early enough that you're not competing against, reigning MVP Lamar Jackson's deal. And who knows how Josh Allen and Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold and these guys are going to grow this year, and then you'll be competing against those. And this market just continues to go up, and then you're competing against a TV deal. My thing is that when you look at the big extensions they've done, they have not really, I don't think, won one. I don't think people would say the Cowboys have won a big extension since Tyron Smith, which is 6 years ago. And I don't know why this is the one at the most important position, that this is the one that they're really trying to dig in and win.
I truly believe if he had a different agent, it would have gotten done. I'm dead serious.
That's probably part of it. The Cowboy, I've said this before on here, the Cowboys I know have said privately before to people that is one of their least favorite agents to deal with.
And when I think of the timeline, I think of two things. One, a stat I saw this week was since the beginning of April 2019, 7 quarterbacks have signed new deals that average at least $32 million a year. And obviously we're seeing 32, 33, 35, 39, 45, or whatever Mahomes is at. So it's going up. And then I think about training camp 2019, and around September 2019, as we all know, is when Steven says that's the closest they were. Like right as that season started, they thought they were going to get there. And Steven's saying in training camp, we're damn sure not resetting the market. And then what do you know? They reset the market with Zeke. And although Amari, I get that there's not after 2 years, the max value, they reset the market there. So I don't know. It's like on one hand, those guys got the deal
agents picked up, but the agents in all of those situations, Jori, picked up the phone. They had no communication with Todd France.
Right. I know this spring was very quiet.
Like everyone is fascinated by that. I'm like, there was no communication. So I think you got, for lack of a better word, a little P-match between the two. And I think they ended up both suffering, quite frankly. But unfortunately, the person who suffered the most is Dak. And you hope that Dak doesn't get injured this year. Obviously, he's got insurance and all of those things. But if there was ever a player, to your point, Jori, that deserved to get overpaid, it was that guy.
Right.
I want to put a hypothetical out there for you guys. And I'm not putting this on Zeke. This is just his agent being smart. Zeke gets paid 2 years ahead of time, which if you look at what happened with Todd Gurley and you look at what happened with Leonard Fournette, he probably would not have gotten that contract if he tried to negotiate this year or next year, right?
Yep.
Is there in any way a possibility that because that happened, that hurt the leverage Dak had? And would Dak have been more successful if he'd actually done what Zeke did and hold out last summer with Zeke?
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
I respect Dak for not doing it.
Well, I mean, yeah, squeaky wheel gets the oil. So, yeah, Zeke.
And DeMarcus, too. I'm not having shoulder surgery until you give me this contract.
Exactly. There are certain aspects of and maybe that's where Dak misplayed it a little bit. As we heard consistently Dak saying that, I believe we're going to get it done. I believe in my agent and I believe in the Cowboys that they're going to get this done and this will be a fair deal for everyone. And now he's talking about, respect and things
Which
like that.
I love.
Yeah, I do too.
I personally feel like he needed to say that sooner, because if you listen to DeMarcus Ware and you listened to even Ezekiel Elliott, they talked about why they should get paid more.
Right.
Whereas Dak just always respectfully, and this goes back to even our conversation that we started with, he never, ever comes out and blasts people. And sometimes I want him to come out in defense of himself sometimes even, right? And so I think that's the one thing. I just feel like if he had played a little bit more hardball, and if he either had a different agent or an agent that picked up the phone the way that Cantor did, the way that Rocky Arsenault did, there's a level with the Cowboys where they sort of want you to bend the knee a little bit. They do.
Yeah, and like I say, in other instances, they end out losing. They lose with DeMarcus Lawrence. They lose with Ezekiel Elliott. Jalen Smith is a deal they probably aren't totally thrilled with at this moment. Maybe that changes if he turns things around this year. And so it's just odd that the only other time
Cooper's deal.
Yeah, the only other time we've ever seen a team handle their quarterback situation, their franchise quarterback situation in recent history the same way was Washington. And that is one of the most dysfunctional franchises in this league. And there's not a single way I think you'd want to be compared to Washington after this entire summer. And yet that's who Dallas operated like. And it's like, man, that's a culture of losing that has taken place in Washington for so long. That's the route you take.
With that being said, too, though, just to play devil's advocate here, they offered him $34.5 a year plus $110 million guaranteed, is what I was told. That's like right around the Russell Wilson, Jared Goff, and when you look at all the pieces that they've got around Dak, those are pieces that guys like Russell Wilson don't have, and guys like Alex Smith certainly didn't have. I do agree there is this notion that you can't go to a Super Bowl if you're overpaying at certain positions. Now, I agree that it's like not my problem, the way that DeMarcus Lawrence said a couple of years ago. Like, I get that logic and that frustration, but I do understand that this year there was a number that they could get up to if they wanted to keep all of these moving parts here. And I do believe, and I don't think it's a fair logic, but I look at Amari Cooper and his deal, and he is literally downtown decorating one of the high-rises with his Gatorade spot. Like, there are endorsements that come to you when you are especially the quarterback of the Cowboys, but even more importantly, the quarterback of a Super Bowl winning Cowboy. And again, I don't think it's fair to say, well, we're going to shortchange you here to get this done, or you should give a hometown discount. But I do see some of the sides there. I just think I think Dak hit the nail on the head the other day. Both sides are going to have to give a little bit.
Yeah.
Sure. I think that's exactly where we're at. But I would also guess that on Todd France's side, or whoever would be the negotiator on Dak's side, which you remember, we talked about the deal with David Cantor. David Cantor says, well, Cowboys fans can hate me too. If I was Dak's agent, I would have told them go jump in the lake too.
I remember
and he says that, I think that when it comes to quarterbacks, those things don't move the needle for them. Look at sponsorship opportunity, because you can point to Aaron Rodgers and say Aaron Rodgers is on national commercials in the smallest market in the NFL. And if you are a star quarterback, you'll get those opportunities regardless. So that's why it may be harder for Dallas to sell a guy like Dak on those. But Jori, go ahead. I know I interrupted you there.
Oh, no, you're good. Yeah, and I mean, again, I heard a little bit different numbers, but as we always know, there's at least three sides to every story.
What numbers were you told, Jori?
I need to look back at my notes, but it was not 34.5 a year. Certainly the whole, and I think we're probably in agreement on this, 5 years versus 4 years. But I want to say it was much closer to that 33 Goff range. It wasn't more than Goff, and it wasn't going to be for 4 years per the average. The guarantees, that was kind of a sticking point that I heard, is that if you have Goff and Wentz, who got it done last year, and they did it for 4 years, which again, if you're the Cowboys, you can say, but there were deals left, but still it's the extension, and the Cowboys could have done it in 2019. So my understanding was it was a big thing of why are we trying to get Goff Wentz averages per year, for 5 years when we want 4, no more guarantees, when the market has moved. So again, I think it's probably somewhere in between. I also think one point of nuance that I heard, which it's been some time now, was, is this a number that we're talking about that was on that phone call at the deadline on July 15th, or is this a written offer? And if it was just a phone call an hour or two before the deadline, how serious is that? Because like they had to have the deal done by that 3 o'clock, whatever it was,
Right.
July 15th deadline. So I don't know. It's interesting. And again, I think that like probably both of them are true in different ways. And like, there's just so much nuance to this, but that was where I heard the respect factor came in.
I could see that.
And I know Jane and I heard separately because we had discussed this at the time. I know Jane and I heard separately about not different things. We heard the same thing from separate people about the initial thing that Dallas offered up last summer was inadequate. How much do you think, if that's the same that you heard, how much do you think potentially whatever inadequacy there was with the initial offer may have damaged things to the point that it wasn't able to all be ironed out over the course of a year?
You know, I think it probably affected it last year. And again, to whatever degree Dak was going high because they were going low in terms of the initial numbers. I don't think that's what the spring was about. I think that there, like Jane was saying, there just wasn't a lot of conversation because it wasn't that they were having these conversations. And again, from what I know, I wasn't there. It's not that I'm hearing, oh, they talked in April, May, and June, and they're like, well, you said this last July, and that was disrespectful, so we're going to do this. I just don't think they were talking. And then I also think that there's a part of Dak's camp that says, okay, if he's going to make 37.7 on the franchise tag last year or next year, and then on top of that, given all these like franchise tag minutia rules, he can never be on the first franchise tag again because I guess the second one has to be 120% the price of the first one. So no matter what team he's with, if somehow he's not with the Cowboys, his earning power goes up forever in the NFL because he burned off that first franchise tag. So I think that they were using that as a factor, that if we're trying to get our guy the money and he's going to be here and it's in the Cowboys' best interest to keep him here, we don't have to, it's not 0 or 31. I mean, that was a factor that I was hearing.
I just think the biggest thing is like Kirk Cousins, obviously a guy that mirrored a lot of this. I'm like, he's just such an outlier how that worked out for him, you know? Like,
Right.
I don't know if I would have just like banked on necessarily all of that. At the end of the day, though, I would be very, very shocked, barring a complete breakdown by Dak Prescott this year and problems with him and his coach, which I would literally bet my life savings on it. That won't be an issue. I would be very, very shocked if he is not the guy in Dallas and a deal is reached. But last summer, I was like, oh, this deal's getting done. It'll be him, then Amari Cooper, then Zeke. And I couldn't have been more wrong. So
yeah,
we'll see.
all of us.
Yeah, it's that's the thing. We all, every step of the way, have gone, it'll get done before training camp. It'll get done before the season. Well, it'll get done next. So who knows? Yeah, I bet maybe we're all sitting here in 2022 going, man, that Bill Belichick, Dak Prescott pairing, it's just awesome there in New England, isn't it?
But what you say about the Mike McCarthy partnership, and again, personally, my interactions with Aaron Rodgers have been very positive. But what we hear, I think he just has a very different demeanor than Dak. So if you're coaching Aaron Rodgers, then you go to Dak and you're saying, like, can these guys get along? Like, if you can get along with Aaron Rodgers, I think you can get along with Dak. And I respect both of them a lot.
I find Mike McCarthy, he's kind of a smartass, and I love it. Like, I absolutely love the zings. I like, because Stephen Jones will give you the same sort of demeanor. It still feels like they're brothers. Like, he is more Stephen's kin than even Jerry Jones Jr. is. Like, those two remind me so much of each other.
Stephen and McCarthy look a little alike. If you look at like young Stephen,
it is bizarre.
There's some similarity. Which, by the way, to your point, I do love. I had messaged somebody on the Green Bay beat that I know right after they hired McCarthy, and I was just like, "Hey, just curious, what's he like dealing with on the thing?" And the reply back was, "He's Pittsburgh as hell." I said, "What does that mean?" And they said, "You'll find out." And yeah, that's turned out to be a pretty good descriptor. Pittsburgh as hell.
Okay, when we're talking about his zingers, we can't talk about his zingers without acknowledging what happened to you in the press conference the other day, Jane. Because I know, and if whoever's listening to this, even if you're following the Cowboys, you probably could have heard the press conference and you could see McCarthy, but you can't see us. And like straight up, we have this technology that has been malfunctioning for weeks, despite this being the most valuable franchise in the world. And then it's like we're trying to figure out these speakers. So picture like I'm up in the front because they're like Jori mumbles. We need to get her close to the speaker. Jane's in the back, and you come up, and then literally when Mike was like, I'm not an expert on this, but based off the tendencies I'm seeing, I think you're talking too close to the speaker. I'm like, he is scouting this, like the way we are reporting now, and it's still not working. But I like the fact that he said, I see that he was observing the tendencies. I could not.
The analytics.
Joy was laughing next to me. I mean, I was wearing my mask. I'm like removing my mask. I'm like leaning into the speaker because I'm like, oh, I'm not going to have this delay. Like, this isn't good. And then it's like back up. And I'm like, sorry, coach. Like, I'm at the back of the classroom. I literally, I find him wildly entertaining. And he always gives us really interesting, complete answers. They're thoughtful ones. But I
always complete answers. I beg to differ. I don't know. I don't know these physical ailments.
They're completely dancing around things. But here's what I'll say: he's maddening for us reporters. I've never been more frustrated than when he removed those jersey numbers and names at the blue and white scrimmage game. But if you're a Cowboy fan and a player, you've got to love the fact that the fact that I'll just put it this way. I had 3 Super Bowl winning coaches reach out to me and say, we didn't know about this rule that we didn't have to put jersey numbers and names on the jerseys. And I was like, wait, what? Bill Belichick had done this in OTAs, and then the Ravens complained about it, and then the Ravens and the league decided that was a new rule. And so you could not have players at practice because that was when you could, if you had a player that was hurt, you could substitute them. And so it was a great game plan by Bill Belichick, but it didn't hold any water. So when I reached out to the league and I was like, can Mike do this? They're like, oh, yeah, the new rule is until September 7th. I was like, oh, we're already doing a little game.
Okay, and then also on those rules, what about the fact that, okay, so as reporters, we can no longer watch the whole practice now like we do in training camps. We get 30-ish minutes, but they've set it up so the quarterbacks work inside on their quarterback school. We're outside. And the day we went to practice, I guess Wednesday, because Thursday was a little bit different, we were walking back to go there because they said practice access was over, and there had been no sign of Dak Prescott, no sign of Andy Dalton, and we're like, oh, no quarterbacks. Like, who knows? Like, what if it was last year and he was still injured? And then another little tweak like that, okay, last year also. We were going to practice Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Well, McCarthy has this whole sports science situation where it's workload Thursday, recovery and soft tissue, something or another Friday, and then on Saturday you're doing your neurological activation. But we're not allowed out there Saturday. And again, me personally, I don't work on Saturdays, gotta love the Sabbath. But I was talking to another reporter on the beat, and they're like, how does he get away with cutting us down from 3 practices to 2, no quarterback? And I'm like, I think if you're trying to fight it, you got to go back to Green Bay and figure out, were those reporters at practice on Saturday? Because a lot of things this year are, we wish we could show you this too, but there's a pandemic going on. And I'm like, that's how'd you know? That's why you didn't show it to us last year either, and the year before.
Maybe it returns to normal when we get done with pandemic.
No way.
I will say that every time anybody asks McCarthy about the status of an injury, it's vividly reminds me of when I ask my son about why homework didn't get turned in, and it's what's homework? I
didn't hear your question. I always love that too. His go-to is I didn't hear the question.
But what about when we asked if he would kneel during the anthem? He's like, are we done here? And granted, again, the technology wasn't working that day. I'm not saying it couldn't have been a tech factor, but at some point, if this happens 10 times very conveniently, you got to be skeptical as a reporter.
And he's a worthy adversary. I look forward. He's forced me to step my game up. I actually love it.
Well, and then what was I about to say? Oh, with Amari's injury. And that Sunday blue-white scrimmage, we're at AT&T Stadium. Someone asked about Amari. He's like, oh, numbers. And I literally said, so as it relates to Amari Cooper's health, do you have any concerns? You probably should have concerns about her. And he was like, I had no concerns. And then 2 days later, it's like, we look at the numbers. He's been in the league a while. And then if you're Amari, you're like, it's fine. This is just who we are. But I'm like, you can't get away with it. That's why when we talked to it was the offensive line coach, I was like, this is weeks ago when Cam Irving wasn't in practice and no one would say anything about his absence. And I was like, hey, Joe, thanks for your time. How's Cam doing? What's his progress? And why hasn't he been practicing? Just hoping that someone else, if you just asked it directly, would answer. And he's like, yeah, I'm not going to comment on that. And I'm like, is anyone going to comment on anything in the year 2020?
That's the worst part about losing locker access is the fact that we've lost Amari Cooper's totally open explanation of every injury, where it's like, hey, Amari, what are you dealing with? And he's like, let me show you my bruise. So I talked to the doctor, and they said that the way the muscles break, Amari is always great to ask about his injury. So we've kind of lost that ability this year.
I know. I've been trying to text a couple guys and be like, hey, really miss being able to come by your locker.
Getting back to you?
Okay, most of them, I had one guy getting back to me for a little bit, but for the most part, it'll be completely non-competitive things chess questions. And It's a little bit different than last year, I'll tell you.
I was
I
just
had
curious
an
about- I was
undrafted
beginning
free
to-
agent in June whose agent was like, yeah, we were told to like stop talking to reporters and lay a little lower. And I'm like,
I was beginning to wonder if these guys had just lost my number, changed numbers, but I can't get players to get back to me either. And to your point, innocuous questions.
yeah.
Like, I'm not asking them about game plans, another player and their like nothing. So again, maddening as a reporter. I'm leaning in, as most of us are, with workflow and the changes that come with COVID, but it does make it very, very hard to do your job. If I'm a Cowboys fan, I'm excited though, because it did feel like there was a whole lot of information out there as related to this team that opposing teams would use against them.
Yeah. I miss those walk-offs though that we would have with Jason Garrett.
Yeah, lots of great info there. But again, as Jane said, everybody adjusting, raising their game, and Jori's included in that. So if you want, go follow Jori on Twitter at Jori Epstein. It's Epstein, not Epstein. I'm clearing things up.
Bobby with the sign.
I know, I'm clearing things up for Jori here since everybody seems to be Epstein, but it's Epstein.
It was a cathartic moment.
Yes, Epstein. Jori Epstein on Twitter. Give her a follow. Jori, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me on.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. If you would do us a favor, hit subscribe over here. And if you want more Cowboys content, you can check it out over here. Thanks again for watching.